Hello, good people, and welcome to Finance Skills Hub. Here, we learn, we connect, and we grow. For this an interesting video, we want to create a simple inventory management dashboard with no functions, right? So this video is going to show you how you can use only pivot tables and Power Pivot to create that full dashboard from raw data sets. So if you're excited as I am, join me and let's get this started step by step. Okay, so before we begin, let's walk through our final work. So this is our final work, basically showing the total quantity received, the total dispatched, and the quantity available at every point in time, right? It also shows the trend for stock availability over here. And then you can also slice by location. So example, if your products are spread across different stores or shelves, we have a slicer here that allows you to view this by shelf, right? So I can select and see the products in each shelf, right? Now, the good thing about this is if I select any shelf or I'm looking at the entire warehouse, I get a summary table that shows me the product details, ID, name, location, and also shows in ascending order the quantity available for the bottom 10 products. Okay, so this gives you an idea which ones you have to restock and all that. It also shows the reorder level, right? Then for the products that you have selected, so beyond just seeing the entire list of products, we made provision for this filter here that allows you to select a particular product or some products, right? So if I select product 1, right, it gives me the status of just product 1 in the summary table, and also above the trend here also reflects the product that you have selected, right? So this is what we are going to build, and the idea is to show you that even without formulas, you should be able to build this from scratch just using pivot tables and Power Pivot. So let me walk you through the data sets and then we'll start our work. So we are starting with just two data sets, the product dimension table, which basically has the details of each product. So you notice here that every product here has the shelf details, the reorder level, and the reorder quantity. Basically, this gives us further and better details for each product, right? So every product here is registered once, right? You can add on attributes that you want to add to your product. So that is the product table. Then we have the transactions table. So this is the table that monitors when we receive and when we dispatch, right? It's a very simple table that has only dates, the product ID, the transaction type, whether it is a receipt or a dispatch, and then the quantity that was received or dispatched, right? Now, the basic idea is because we don't want to create redundant data, we have only the product ID in the transactions table, right? So if you have the product ID, you should be able to use the product ID to look up all the details you need from the product register. That's the basic connection we are going to use here. So as long as we're able to connect these two tables, then we have all the lookup details we need to create our final dashboard, right? So let's start. First, this is a normal range of data, so I'm going to convert it into a table. So standing in here, I'll go to insert, then I will insert a table on this to make it easier for us to reference the data. So I'll name this products. Then I'm going to do same for transactions. Shortcut is Control T to insert the table. So I'll name this transactions. Okay, so with these two tables, I'm going to load them into Power Pivot. The idea is if I load them into Power Pivot, I can create a data model and then connect the two tables, right? So Power Pivot is an add-in. It used to be a standalone prior to Excel 2016. But if you have 2016 above, Power Pivot is embedded, it's already inside your Excel version. You just have to activate it. So if you're not seeing Power Pivot here as a tab, you go to Data. In the Data Tools group, right, you see this lemon cube here, the data model. So you activate it there. It opens up and then you see Power Pivot now part of your tabs, right? So with Power Pivot enabled, all you need to do is stand in the table and then add the tables to the data model, right? So this is my first table. I've added products to the data model. So I'm going to close the Power Pivot window, come to transactions, and then do same for transactions. So again, I'll add transactions to my data model, right? So this is my dimension table and my fact table. In the Power Pivot environment, you see that I have data view and diagram view, right? So I'm going to switch to the diagram view, right? So over here, my transactions table, which is my fact table, is normally placed below. What I really want to do is to create a schema that has my dimension table at the top, filtering my fact table. Now, we need two things. We need the product to be able to break down by product, and then a table that contains dates for our date analysis, right? Now, guess what? In Power Pivot, you can actually create an automatic date table, okay, that scans the time range you have in your data. So under design, you have your date table. If I create new, now you notice that I have just created a calendar table. Okay, so this calendar table will help me break down by dates. Okay, so now I can create a connection. So I have my products here. Now products is going to be connected to the transactions table using product ID. So think of it as a lookup, right? The product ID is your lookup value, right? So this is my foreign key connecting to my primary key here, right? One to many. Now I have my calendar. So for my calendar, I'm going to connect dates, okay, to dates right here, right? So with these tables connected, I can get information from all the tables to create my pivot tables. That's the basic idea. Now, when I'm done, in Power Pivot, I can exit and create a pivot table directly, right? The dashboard you see is just driven by pivot tables, right? So if I come here and I click, I can start creating pivot tables in a new worksheet. So for this purpose, I'm going to call this calculations. That's the worksheet. Okay, so we're just going to be creating a series of pivot tables. Now, for each of the metrics in the dashboard, total received, total dispatched, quantity available, we are going to create basic aggregations, right, using pivot tables. So for total received, if I'm able to sum up all the quantity, okay, and then filter it by receipts, right, that's basically the calculation that I'm looking for. So in this pivot table, I'll activate my pivot table fields, okay, come to my transactions. I have quantity here, so I'll check quantity, right? This is for all the inflows and then the outflows. So I have 1713, but I want only receipts. So to get that, I'll come to transactions and then take the transaction type, right? And then take it to my filter position, right? So over here, I'm able to decide whether I want to see only receipts or dispatch. So I'll select only receipts. Right, the expectation is that it's going to filter this and give me only the receipts. Okay, now with pivot tables, you don't have to start the whole process. I can recycle or copy and paste what I've created already and just change the fields, right? But usually when you have the filters side active, which is this part, you have to be careful how you select the pivot table. The best way is under pivot table analyze, which is the tab. You come to select and then you choose entire pivot table. That way, select the filter and whatever value sections that you have. Right. So I'll copy this. I normally will recommend placing your pivot tables in one worksheet so that it allows room for expansion. But for this tutorial, I want to place the pivot table side by side. Right. So I'll place this one here. Right. So the only change I want to do here is instead of the receipts as my transactions type, I'm going to choose dispatch and then I'm going to click OK. So this will take care of all the aggregations for the dispatch, right? So I'll come here and then select this entire pivot table again, right? Copy this and then paste this here. Okay. So here, I don't need the filter. I need this, the net position, right? So what we've basically done is we've taken care of the first three metrics, the total received, the total dispatched, and the quantity available, right? So next up, let's do our stock availability trend, right? So over here, it's basically the same pivot table we have that shows the stock available, but we want to slice this or break this down by month. So I'll copy this and paste this here, activate my pivot table field, okay? I already have the quantity, so I want to slice this by month. Okay, so I'll come and then put in the month here from our calendar table. So I have something like this. Okay. So this is what we have for the stock availability. But you notice that it is rather giving us a net position, but we want the cumulative, right? So we want the rolling sum for all the months, right? So we can simply achieve that by standing in the quantity section, right click any number there, and then you see the option to show values as, right? So you can choose running total in, right? So running total in, it gives you the option to choose the base field, which is going to be month. Okay, so this is going to be the cumulative sum of the quantity available month on month, right? So this is going to take care of that chart. Now, what we need to do is, if you look at how we created this chart, we just gave the first letters of each month. That's January to December, right? So to do that, we want to create a mirror of the pivot table so that we can just extract just the first lines, right? So I'm going to use flash fill. So flash fill will detect the pattern I'm going to use to extract the text, right? But I need to leave like a blank column. So I'm going to put a placeholder here, right? And then start off with J so that it knows the continuous data. And then I'll do Control E. So Control E will just scan this M column, right? And then bring what I'm looking for, right? So once this is done, I can now take this off. So I have my first letters, right? And then now link directly the values that we have over here. We'll ensure that the shape stays the same, okay, by making sure pivot table always shows the 12 months, okay. So this is going to be the staging for our chart, right? Now, the next metric that we want to concentrate on is the summary table. So the basic thing that we want to do is create a breakdown of the quantity available, the reorder level, and then break it down by product ID, product name, and location, right? So that is going to be another pivot table. So I'm going to take this pivot table, Control C, and then paste this here. Okay, now I'll come in and then change the pivot table field list. So over here, I already have the sum of quantity, right? Instead of breaking down by rows, I'll take off rows and then bring in my product ID, okay? Then bring in my product name and then bring in the shelf, right? Now, based on the default layout of my pivot table, the arrangement is going downwards, right? I can change that into a tabular view by going to design, okay? Then in the report layout, I'll show this instead of compact form, I'll show this in a tabular form, right? So this is going to give me my product ID, my product name, shelf, and then the sum of quantity. So at this point, all I need to do is add the reorder level. Okay, so I'll add the reorder level for each product, right? Now, in each case, I need to take off the grand total. So I'll take off the grand total for this, and then also take off the grand total for this as well. Okay. Now, what this table is going to do is we want it to show the item with the lowest quantity. So we want to sort this so that the item with the lowest quantity is always at the top. That can be done by selecting the filter icon here in the product ID. That's the basis for our sorting. And then I'll come to more sort options. When this dialog box pops up, we have the option to sort this time in ascending order because we want the lowest on top, right? So I'm going to sort this by sum of quantity. That is the net position. That is the available stock, okay? And then I'll click OK. So at every point in time, we see the bottom 10 that has to be restocked, right? So the pivot tables we've created so far will make it easier for us to now create these metrics on our dashboard, right? So the final thing that we need to do is to now calculate the percentage of stock available. So before we proceed, I think it's important we name each pivot table, right? So that we know what this is about. So this is for the receipts, okay? This is for the dispatch. And then this for the quantity available. Now, beyond naming the headers for the pivot table, it is also advisable to name the pivot table itself because in the end, we'll be connecting slices. right? So I'll take the tab here, pivot table analyze, and for each pivot table, you can stand in there, right? And then name it based on what the content is. So this is for receipts, makes it easier. So this is going to be dispatch. This is also going to be quantity, right? I'll name this one trend. And then finally, this is going to be my summary. Right. See how this helps when we create our final dashboard. Okay, so we now have this. Now I want to calculate the available quantity, right? So let me just put availability here. So availability is basically going to be how much I have, which is this quantity, divided by our receipts. Okay, so this is the only calculation we are going to do, just an equal to divide. Right? So this is 38%. So for me to be able to do my donut charts, right, I'm going to create a 1 minus this, okay, so that I have the other parts of my donut charts. Right? So this is going to be my availability. Okay, so we've basically set the stage for all our calculations, right? Next up, let's create our dashboard. Okay, so we are going to create our dashboard, and before you create your dashboard, there are some few things that you need to pay attention to, right? You need to be able to make room for margins. Makes it easier on the eye for your user to separate the objects in your dashboard, right? So I'll set the margins and then set the width for the columns that I'm going to use. Then I'll use a faint gray color in the background, create my shapes, and then we are all good, right? So let's do it step by step. So I'll create a new worksheet, okay? Normally like my dashboard in the first sheet. So I'm going to name this dashboard. Okay. Now, if you notice, A, C, E, G, I, K, right, are all margins. So if I select A, C, G, I, K, M, right, these are all margins, right? So usually you can set the width by coming to format, right, and then set column width. Okay, so I'll set this to 2, right? And then for the rest of the columns, that is B, D, E, F, H, J, L, N, right, onwards, right? I can set this to 70. Now this depends on your laptop screen, right? So as long as all the visuals can be seen, please set it to make it easier for your user, right? So now that we've set our margins, okay, what we need to do is I'm just going to fill this background with a faint gray color. So this first shade, the 5% darker, is what I'm going to use. So that way my shapes, which is going to be white, can contrast nicely, right? So this is what I have here. So now that I've done this, I can now insert my shapes, okay? So if you look at the shapes that we have here, these are just basic shapes. I'm going to insert the rounded rectangle, right? So this is the shape that we are going to use. So I'll insert this here, okay? Now I'll format the first one and then just duplicate for the rest. So the shape fill is going to be white, okay? The shape outline, I'm going to choose none. And then for the shape effects, I'm going to add a shadow, right? But I'll go to shadow options, okay? And then set the first preset, right? I'm here because I want to change the color, not to this default black, but to the third shade of gray, which is 25% darker, right? Right. So this is what I'm looking for. Okay, so with this, I can now duplicate, right? So E is supposed to be a margin. So let me just quickly fix that, right? So to duplicate, you can select the shape, hold Control Shift, and then slide to the right, right? Make sure it's aligned, right? So I'll do this for this one as well, right? And then, so you notice that the trend chart has a wider background. So I'll extend this a bit. And then the final one is for our donut chart, okay, which I'm going to place here for now. So this will be the background for the dashboard that we want to create, right? So now that we've brought in our shapes, right, let's insert some rows at the top, okay? and then create the rows for our summary table, right? So starting from row 13, I'm going all the way to row 23. That gives me my 10 rows. Okay, so I'll skip control, select this, skip control, select that. So I'm basically looking for 5 columns. Okay, so this, right. Now, this is a summary table, but if you notice, the border lines that we used for this was white, right? So while this is selected, I'll come in here, change my line color to white, okay, and then go and apply my border lines, right? So I'll put in all border lines here, right? Now, just for effect, we decided to fill in with very soft colors, right? You can design it as you please, right? So this one, so this, I'm going to use this shade of green, okay, and then I'll select this one and then use this shade of blue, okay. Then next, I'm going to use this green, right? So, and I'll have my orange here, and then finally I'll use this shade of blue. So this is just to set the stage for your dashboard. I mean, when you are creating dashboards, you can iterate as you go, right? Now, let's proceed and then fill in our calculations, right? So this is going to be total received. Now, to fill in the shape, all you need to do is select the shape, right? Go to your formula bar, place an equal to here, you go to your calculations, and then you just select this, press enter, right? So for this dashboard, the font that I used is Sun FB, right? So this is what I'm going to use. So I'll select and then choose Sun for this, right? And increase the font to about 28, right? Center and middle align. So I have this. So I'll come and do the same thing for my dispatch. What I want to achieve is, you know, the dispatch is already negated, but I don't want the negative sign to appear in my dashboard, right? So I want to take care of that. But instead of putting a minus sign in my formula, I can format this. To format this to get rid of the negative numbers, you can press Ctrl 1, right? Now, we are going to use a custom format. So when it comes to formatting numbers, there are 4 sections, all separated by semicolons, right? So if I come here and I put in 3 semicolons, right? So the first part before the first semicolon is your positive number, right? So over here, you can use an existing one. So this is a comma separated positive number, right? So this will be followed by a semicolon. Now, for negative numbers, they are normally negated, but for this purpose, I want to repeat the same formatting for the negative number, right? So this is how you format this. So the moment I click OK, you notice that I have my comma separated figure without a negative number, right? So this way I can come, click equal to, come to my calculations, and then now reference this, right? Now, I must say that if you are referencing this directly, you may get an error, right? If you are referencing the pivot table, ensure that you have turned off get pivot data, right? So to turn off get pivot data, you come to pivot table analyze, come to options, and then turn off the tick against generate get pivot data. That will make it easier for you to directly reference the calculations in your pivot tables. Okay, so let's continue with our reference. So I'll come in here, do an equal to, and then come to my calculations and then bring in my quantity as well, right? Now, to apply the format, I can just select the first one, double click the format painter, touch this and touch that. So this gives me the format for all the metrics, right? Now for our trend charts, we already have the chart in place, right? So I'll come here, highlight this mirror that we created, insert the recommended chart, which is the line with markers. So I'll choose this, okay? I'll take off the labels because I just basically want to see the trend, right? And then take off the grid lines, take off the title, okay? Then for the rest of the formatting, I can cut the chart, come to my dashboard, and then use the background, okay, to fit in my chart. So I'll come in here, squeeze this in a bit. Okay, so now that I've fit this in, let's make some changes. So I'll come to format, take off my shape outline, okay, and then make my line a bit thinner. So I'll select and press Ctrl+1. That allows me to come to the line and then reduce the width, let's say to about 1, okay. So I have something like this. Same way, I'll switch to marker, okay, and then for marker options, I'll reduce the size to about 3. Okay, so this will now give me the trend that I'm looking for. Okay, so this completes our chart. So this just ensure that the chart fits in the background that you have allocated for it, right? So now that we are done with our charts, we can now go ahead and then fill in our bottom 10, right? So our bottom 10 is already calculated. So I'll come into the first cell, go to my calculations, and then reference this, right? So bottom line is I just want the first 10. So if I select the labels for each of them, I'll just copy it down and then I should be fine. So this is for shelf. This is for my sum of quantity. So later I'll put in all the labels, and then this is for my reorder level. So I'll select this, hold Control, select that, right? Select all these. And then to copy it down, I'll just press Ctrl D, right? While we are here, we can center to make it easier on the eye, right? So later we'll put in our labels. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to bring in the chart that shows the available stock at every point in time. That has already been calculated. So if I come here, right, I'll just highlight this and then insert the donut chart on this. So I'll select this donut chart, take off my chart title, okay, and then cut the rest of the chart, Control X, come to my dashboard, and then paste this over here. So just as we did for the line chart, we need to ensure that this fits nicely in the space that we gave for it, right? I want to make the ring a bit bigger. So I'll select this, press Ctrl+1, and then reduce the donut hole size to 65%. Okay. While this is selected, you can switch to the buckets and then take off the border lines. Okay. So this will give you a simple donut chart. Now, what we want to do is for the part that represents the quantity available, okay, we want to color that part green. So I'm going to color this part green, highlight just that part. And then for the part that has been used, I want to color that with a shade of gray. Okay, so this will be our donut chart. I can take off the border line. So to take off the border lines, I'll select the chart, go to format, and then use shape outline, and then choose no outline, right? So this way you have a very clean chart sitting in the white background. Now we want the available stock in percentages to show in the middle of the chart. We can do this by inserting a text box. So I'll come, so insert a simple text box over here. Okay, and then while the text box is active, I'll select it on the border lines, put in an equal sign in the formula bar, and then we come to our calculations and select 38%, which is available stock, right? So just as we did, we'll format this nicely, place this in the middle and center, okay, and then take off the outline for the text box, right? You can increase the font a bit. Okay, so this will leave you something like this. So we're almost there. All we need to do now is to insert our slices, right? So because we use Power Pivot, we can insert the slicer directly from the data model, right? So I'll go to insert. I have slicer here, right? So this slicer is going to be on the shelves, right? So I'll choose the data model and then go into the data model. All my tables are here. So I'll come and then look for products. So the product dimension table and then choose shelf, right? And then click OK. So this is the slicer we are going to use, right? Now we are going to go through a series of steps to format this properly. The first thing that we want to do is to increase the height of the button, right? That is available under the slicer tab over here. So I can increase this to about 6, okay, just to be sure that all the slicers are showing over here, right? So this is going to be the layout. Now, if you look at the final work, we have chosen a shade of gray for the button selected, right? So we need to go and format the slicer, right? So to format the slicer, we'll select the slicer, go to the slicer tab, right? And then right click any of them and then create a duplicate. So over here, we can modify and then create our custom slicer. So I'm going to name this Finex. Now, there are parts of the slicer that we can modify, not all. So we just do just about the first 3 and then we should be fine. So I'll start with the whole slicer. Now for the whole slicer, the font is going to be as it is. We'll take off the border lines. So I'll switch to border lines and then choose none. And then for fill, because we want the background to be the same as the slicer background, we'll choose the same shade of gray for the fill, right? So this will complete the slicer. This will complete the whole slicer settings. For our header, right, we'll come to font, we'll maintain it as it is. Then for our border line, okay, instead of this blue, we are going to choose gray. Once you choose the color, choose the line type, right? So you click on these two, and then we'll switch to fill, we'll leave it at no color, okay? So that is going to be for our header. Then for the selected item with data, which is currently showing this shade of blue, okay, we'll select it. And then instead of this blue, the fill, we are going to change it to this gray, the second gray, or you can do the third gray if you want. So we'll choose the second gray. Then for borders, we choose none. And then we maintain the font as it is, right? So I'll click OK. Now, we can go on, but for just these 3, it should be fine. So I'll complete my formatting. And then once I click this, you notice that I now have this nicely blending in. Okay, so if I choose shelf, this is how it displays. It leaves the rest white. So this will complete the formatting for our slicer, right? Now, the last thing that we need to do is to bring in the product selector, right? Basically, what the product selector is doing is, instead of using slices, which will bring us a very long list, we've put in the filter for the pivot table, right? So over here, we can come and then choose any product that we want. But the idea is that it is linked to all the pivot tables. So we need to find a way to connect it to all the existing pivot tables for it to control or filter it, right? So to be able to do that, we'll go backstage to our calculations. So we are going to basically create a new pivot table. I can duplicate an existing one, but because I'm dealing with a data model, I can also insert one directly from the data model, right? So if I do that and I place it in this existing worksheet, right, I get the same pivot table field. Now, basically what I want is just the product name as a filter, right? So this is going to give me the product name as a filter, right? Now, we want to tie a slicer to this filter, right? So while I'm standing here, I will insert a slicer in this pivot table, right? On product name, the same output. We are basically not going to be using this slicer, but it's just going to be in the background so that it syncs with whatever has been selected in the filter. And this slicer will now control the rest of the pivot tables, right? So while this slicer is here, when you right click, you see the option to connect this to the other pivot tables under report connections, right? So I'll choose report connections. Okay, so this is why it was important we name our pivot tables. So the current pivot table is pivot table 16. I haven't named that yet. So I'll connect this to dispatch, quantity, receipts, summary, and then trend. Okay, so if I click OK, now whatever I select is going to filter the rest of the pivot tables, which will then filter the metrics that I have on my dashboard. Right, so this is how this is going to work. Now, I'm going to place this in the dashboard. So I'll highlight the area covering the filter, cut it, and then come to the dashboard, okay, and then place this here. Okay, so I can turn off the field list for this and then make some adjustment to the column if you want. Okay, so you can always reposition this. So for our product name, which is actually a pivot table, what we want is if somebody selects a product from here, we don't want the width of the columns to adjust. So to be able to achieve that, I'll come to pivot table analyze, come to options for the pivot table, right? Under layout and format, there's an option for auto fit column width on updates. I'll uncheck that, right? So that it maintains the same width throughout, right? So what's going to happen is that if I come here and I choose only product one, okay, the expectation is that it should filter all the labels that I have over here. Okay, now based on the selection, you realize that if there are no other records in our summary table, right, we have a lot of zeros. Okay, so we want to highlight this whole area, and then instead of showing zeros, we want it to show blanks, right? So I'll select this whole area, Control 1, and then come to my custom format. Earlier, I showed you the structure for custom formatting, right? So what we are going to do is we want it to show positive numbers. So I'll put in a hash for a placeholder, then semicolon, then we go to the negative position. I want that to be negative hash. Okay, then a semicolon, and then the third section is for zeros. Because I don't want anything to show for zeros, I will leave that there, and then bring the next semicolon, right? But remember, I've selected an area that includes text, right? So the fourth area has to be provided for, and here I'm going to put in at. Okay, so it's going to be hash semicolon minus hash semicolon semicolon to skip the zero space and then at. Okay, so when I do this, I get this blank. If I select only one product, I don't have to see all the zeros. If I select all, you notice that I have my full display. Okay, so we've basically put in all the key metrics in our dashboard. Now, the last thing we need to do is to connect our shelf slicer. Right, so I'll right click, come to report connections, and then connect this to all the pivot tables, right? So receipts, summary, okay, and then trend, right? Now, if I want shelf to control what can be selected over here too, I can link it to the pivot table system which we just created, but I'll leave that out and then I'll click OK, right? So at this point, you notice that all my shelves are controlling everything that I have over here, right? So we are basically done. We didn't use any function. All that is left now is to put in our labels, right? So I'll quickly do that. So this is total received. So at this point, I've put in all the labels, right? Now, if you realize the trend goes over a few columns, right? So instead of merging, I can highlight all the columns, press Control 1, come to alignment, right? And then choose center across selection. That way, it sits nicely centered on the columns. You don't have to merge your columns, right? So I can do the same thing for this one as well. Okay, so choose center across selection. Then for bottom 10 stock quantity, I'll leave it as it is, right? So all that's left here is for us to put in our border lines. So I'll put in the bottom border lines. I have to change the color back to the automatic color, which is black. Right, so I'll do that. So select all this one, center it, and then put in the border lines. I'm using the shortcut Alt HBO. Okay, then I'll increase this format a bit. So this is also going to take the border line. Okay. Now for my slicer, I can put in a header for my slicer here. select shelf. Okay, to make it easier for the user, I'll put in a borderline for that as well. So what is left is just some basic touches, right? So let's format the total received and quantity available with the comma separator format. So double click on this format painter, touch this, and then touch that. And then the final thing that we need to pay attention to is when it comes to the trend pivot table, we also want to ensure that all the 12 months show every time. So I'll highlight this, go to the pivot table options, okay, and then under display, I'll choose show items with no data on rows. Okay, so once I do that, even if the slicer acts on it, you always maintain the 12-month display, right? So this is our final dashboard. So at this point, when I select any shelf, you realize that it responds. Okay, I can select any product name and then it also responds. So the basic idea is that even without complex functions, just using pivot tables, Power Query, Power Pivot can create a very simple dashboard, but yet very insightful dashboard like this, right? So you don't always have to use complex formulas. So talking about Power Pivot, pivot tables, Power Query, DAX calculations, and if you like cube functions as well. If you put all these together, there's a lot more you can achieve in Excel. If you are new to this and you want to dig deep and see how these tools can help you analyze data, create insightful dashboards, then I would like to recommend my book, Data Modeling with Microsoft Excel. It's available on Amazon. The link has been provided over there. Grab a copy. You go through a case study that allows you to use all these tools right from the beginning to creating an insightful dashboard. I hope this has been a good learning journey. I'll make the Start workbook available so that you can practice step by step. Thank you so much for joining us and see you in the next video.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.